This is a review of Grand National, which is a horse racing betting game. It plays 2 to 6 players, allow about 30 minutes per player. Originally, it was published in 2001, so it's well out of print. If you're interested in this game, please go ahead and check out eBay, Board Game Geek, or Amazon. Periodically, you might be able to score a copy. Okay, I just want to go ahead and show you the components of the game. Here's the board, obviously. There's always going to be 2 decks of cards out. There's a jump card deck that always stays out. Now when a horse lands on a fence, you'll draw a jump card. Turf cards, when a horse lands on a horseshoe spot on the board, you'll draw a turf card. Eventually the turf cards will be replaced by the go for home cards, and the same thing will happen if a horse lands on a horseshoe. Over here is the bookmaker odds sheet. Everybody will be able to refer to this. This is important, especially at the beginning of the game when the bets are taking place. This is the deck of horses. There's 36 horses in the game, so there's a card for each horse. Over here is a sales sheet explaining, just showing each horse, and basically a composite of all these in one sheet for at the beginning when there's auctioning going on. Now in the far right hand corner, this is going to be the rule book. There's paper money over here at 100, 50,000, 20, and 10,000. And then I've laid out a 4-player game here. Haven't filled anything out yet, but each player will receive a stable along with 4 horses to represent each stable spot. You'll also be getting a betting slip and $250,000 cash to start the game. Okay, so once everybody's got their stable color selected and they got their money and everything, it's time to move on to the auction phase of the game. So there are 36 horses in the deck. I just got 3 horses out of 3 different tiers just to show you some difference that occurs in the deck. So there are 6 horses of each tier. So the reserve price is the tier. So $60,000 horse, there's 6 of those, and then $50,000, there's 60, then 40, and 30. You can see here with this one. Then there's 6 $20,000, and then 6 $10,000 horses. So let's take a look at the cards and see some of the differences here. So obviously the higher starting price, reserve price horses generally are going to run better in the races. If you look at Brown Sugar here, there's a number 1, there's a number 24 here for Juliet Jake, and 32 for Mr. Pitiful. Just ignore those numbers. That's just a generic number for the cards in the deck. There's 36 horses. So what we're looking at mainly is the top right hand corner, which is the handicap, and that'll be the horse's movement. Each turn they'll be allowed to move that full movement amount, and then on top of that there's speed points, which I'll explain later on in the game as well. So during the auction phase, you would then go ahead and place a bid. If you pass, you're out of that bid, and if you win the horse, you pay the total amount. That horse then goes into your stable. If we look at Brown Sugar, though, after the auction, we'll set the track conditions. Now, if the track ends up being firm, good, or good to firm, he'd get +2 on all those. So he'd end up being a +7 for the duration of the race. So that would be his handicap. Now his handicap can be changed with stamina penalties and other penalties that can occur, either for the good or the better. I believe you're only allowed to go up to 7 on the handicap. So if you got any increases, he would just stay at 7. And you can't go below 0, like a negative point either. Good to soft, those are both 0s, so he'd stay at 5. Now if it's heavy track, a real muddy track, he'd lose 1, he'd be at 4 movement. And you look at Juliet Jake, again, he's a $30,000 price, so his handicap is pretty low compared to Brown Sugar starting, and Mr. Pitiful is pitiful at 0. But if you look at the track conditions, on a firm or good to firm, Juliet Jake would be +4 or +3, so he'd potentially a 6 or 5 handicap. If it's a really bad track, he won't get any gain on his handicap. Mr. Pitiful is the opposite of that. He's a 0. If it's a firm track, it's a 0 still. Now if it's a real slow track, he's more of a mudder. In the soft and heavy conditions, he would be at +4 movement on his handicap. Now another thing I wanted to add, with the auction taking place here, it can kind of slow the game down even more. This game does tend to play rather long. In the beginning I said about 30 minutes per player, and I think the game plays best at the higher player counts. So what I've done to mitigate this consumption of time here with the added auction, I don't really even play with the auction. I think it's a neat idea. What I do is I just take the deck of horse cards and put them all together, and all the rest of them here, shuffle those all up, and then I'll randomly deal out 4 horses to each player. Whatever horse you get, that's what you get, and you pay the reserve price for the horse, so we don't bid the prices up or whatever. And this seems to work pretty well because, again, a horse that's a $60,000 horse doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a really good horse in the race. After the horses are selected, then we spin for the track conditions, and that could greatly affect some horses. Okay, so here's what your stable would look like after the auction. So the first horse you buy would go as your red cap rider. Your second horse would be your black cap rider, third horse white cap rider, and your fourth horse blue cap rider. That's the same for all colors of the stables. So like the blue you can see here would also have red, black, white, blue. And anyway, so you pay the amount at the top of the card, and then you write in the name here. We'll put the handicaps in here eventually, and we'll adjust the speed points that are allowed for the remainder of the game. After that is done, every player is allowed to make one bet, the anti-post bet, before the track conditions are set. So you can make one bet for any horse in the game. It can be your horse, anyone else's. You can only bet a maximum, well, you can only bet $10,000. And then you can either bet the horse to place or to win. So when you do that, you take the money, you take your little clip here, clip it to your betting sheet, and flip it over so no one knows what it is. Okay, and then later we'll do some bets after the race track conditions have been set. So here are the odds over here. If we zoom in here, oops, if we zoom in, we can see the odds for the horses for the anti-post betting. So the odds are strictly by the reserve price for every horse. So all $60,000 horses are 12-to-1 odds to win and 3-to-1 odds to place. And then the $50,000 horses are 20-to-1 to win, 5-to-1 to place. So if we look at the yellow bet over here, he bet on Lightning Hopkins, which is a $20,000 horse. So he bet him to place. His odds are 16-to-1 to place, and he's 66-to-1 to win. Okay, so that's the anti-post. Okay, so we've all done the anti-post betting. Now we'll spin this spinner over here in the far right-hand corner, and that'll decide the track conditions and also adjustments to the handicap. Okay, so if we spin the spinner here, come on, big money, big money. All right, so it's landed on soft, which is a 56 rating. Okay, so if the track conditions are 56 soft, what that means is you'll go ahead and cross out all the numbers over 56. So now all horses are limited to only 56 speed points for the game. So I've already done that on Mountaineer. I'll cross it out on Maggie May, the horse next to him. And then we'll go on and do that along down the line. Let's go ahead and look at Mountaineer here close up. So his handicap was 5 to start, plus 5. But now we're doing a soft track. So if you look down here, the soft says +1 for Mountaineer. So now he's at a 6 handicap at the beginning of the race, and that will stay like that unless there's any stamina penalties or any other penalties that could occur during the game. So he could come down. There's cards to help bring him back out of that too and get him restored to his original 6 for this race. Okay, I went ahead and adjusted all the handicaps for all riders in each stable. You can see the yellow stable here. Each rider now has their handicap adjusted based on the track conditions, 6, 6, 2, and 3. And because it's a soft track, we're going to only be allowed 56 speed points, so we won't need the whole bottom row, so that's all crossed out. Okay, so here's how the odds were determined. If it's a 7-to-1, or sorry, if it's a horse with 7 handicap, here's this. It's either 6-to-1 or 8-to-1 to win and 2-to-1 to place. And then you go down the line for all the handicaps. So if it's a +6 handicap, it's either 10-to-1 if it's in, I usually do the first row, 12-to-1 if it's in the second or third row, 14-to-1 if it's in the last row. And if it's in the first 2 rows, I do 3-to-1 to place. If it's in the last row, 4-to-1 to place. And you can see all these different odds here for the different handicap horses. Okay, now before we do the betting, went ahead, the bookmaker will write out all the odds for all the horses in the race. So right up here, Brown Sugar's at 16-to-1 to win, 4-to-1 to place. And if you just look down the row, you can see all the odds for all the horses. So in this race, Mr. Whiplash has the best odds. He's the favorite. And then we got a few horses with the 66 to 1 to win, and they're the big underdogs. So this sheet is available for everybody to look at when they're making their bets. So now if we look back here at the betting slip, we can see the yellow player has filled out the rest of his bets. Now he can bet on any horse, doesn't have to be his own. You can bet to win or to place. So he bet on, we did this first bet originally before the track conditions. Then he bet these 3 bets: Mountaineer to place, Maggie May to win, and the Wanderer to place. And then you add up your amounts, take your full amount of money, clip it to your betting slip, and flip it over. You can refer to it during the game, but you just don't want anybody else to see. So here he's bet on 3 of his horses. The Wanderer, which is not his horse, is actually the white cap rider for the green player. So he's hoping that that horse will place. So let's just kind of look at some of the bets here just to give you an idea of the payouts. So Mountaineer is a 10 to 1 to win, a 3 to 1 to place. He bet him to place. So he bet $30,000 times 3 would be $90,000. Okay, now back to the spinner. We're going to spin this to set up to see what order the horses run in for each row. So for the first row of horses, which are the red cap riders, we would go ahead and start with the red player with the red cap. Then we do the white player, red cap, yellow player, red cap, and then the green, red cap. We're not playing with the other 2 players, the black and the blue, so disregard those. Okay, so there's the results of the spin. Remember, red landed first, and then white was next, and then yellow, and then green. So your red cap riders will all go first, followed by your black cap, your white cap, and your blue cap. After the first row of riders leave, the next row of riders will start from the white line. That's where you'll start from. You don't count from back here. You go ahead and spin and do the same for each color helmet, and line up 4 again, spin again, line up 4, spin, and then you're ready to start racing. Okay, so this is what it would look like after we've spun for each row of turns. You can see red is the first to go on the first 2 rows, and then it changed up a little where white goes first and then green. I just want to show you the components a little bit more too in better detail. So yeah, there's these little kind of plastic rubbery horses, hand painted. They're pretty nice for the most part. Every now and then they bend a little too much and they want to fall over. You just bend them back and they'll go back in place. So the race consists of 2 laps. You'll start here, you'll go around 1 full lap, and then you'll come around again. And then instead of coming back to finish here, you'll break at this spot, the elbow. And then let's just zoom in a little there. Yes, you'll break at the elbow there. And then you can see there's kind of a little bottleneck here where it's only 3 wide for the horses. So it can get a little interesting, a little cramped. And the top 4 horses will place. Winner will win $250,000, second will get $100,000, third $50,000, and fourth, I believe, $30,000. So the winner is whoever has the most money at the end of the game, much like in life. No, not really. But so you don't necessarily have to have the horse to win the race to win the whole game. You could have none of your horses place, but as you can see, I just mentioned, there's a payoff for the horses that win, so that helps. But if you bet well too, remember the betting I showed you, that can really help as well. So to start the race, you would race, all 4 horses in the first row would go first, and then all 4 horses in the second row, third row, and fourth row. And the play is supposed to continue like that throughout the rest of the game, where the red cap riders go first, then the black cap, and the white caps, and the blue caps. Now, to start the game, you always start with the horses on the inside first. So this red cap rider, he'll go first. Let's go ahead and zoom in on him a little bit more as far as his card. So I didn't fill out the card fully yet. So I put his handicap there, which is 7. Let me write in the bottom here. So yeah, he's got 56 allowable speed points. So what this means is on a player's turn, they go their full handicap, which is 7 here for Mr. Whiplash. So you always go that. Then you also need to choose how many speed points you want to use for the rest of your movement. So you have to go at least 1, and you can go up to 8 on a turn. You can't go more than 8 on your speed points. Now you want to be careful. You don't want to use up your speed points too fast, or you'll burn your horse out and they'll be gone for the race. Now with a race that has more available speed points, like a 64 firm course, you'll be able to run your horse higher with your speed points. Now, a more restricted race like what we're running here, which is a 56, you're going to have to be a little bit more conservative and spare some of your speed points. So let's go ahead and look back at the race course. So if he's going to go 7, so he's going to go 7 for his handicap, but he'll keep going because of his speed points. So I'm just going to count up the 7 first. Now that's not going to be where he ends his turn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then he can go a few more. So we'll go 8, 9, 10, and let's just end his turn here for a total of 10. So if we look back at his sheet here, we zoom in. So he went 7 for his regular handicap and a total of 10. So we're taking off 3 out of his speed points. Now he could have went up to 8, but I'll tell you why he wouldn't want to do that here. So if we go back up and look at the board, now for the first few laps, there is a catch-up mechanism. So any horse that is 10 lengths or more in front of the second place horse, any horse that's in first, would actually lose 2 points on his handicap for the duration of the race. So if we look at this horse, he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I did that on purpose so he's not more than 10 out in front of the second place horse, which right now would be everybody else. So he doesn't take a handicap. Now if he were to go, let's say he went just a few more moves here. Let's say he went 2 more. So on his turn he traveled 12 instead of 10. So if we look back down at his sheet here, I marked him off for 5, so that would have been a total of 12. And if we look back up at the board, if I can zoom out, you can see now he's quite a bit ahead. He's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 ahead. So remember that number 10, the magic number 10, he's now more than he should be ahead. So if we go back down on his board here, he'll actually take a handicap. He'll take a hit on his handicap. Now, it won't be a stamina penalty. It'll be a handicap penalty. It's a little different than the stamina penalty. So his handicap now is 5 the rest of the game. Now, if he keeps on going the next turn, if he is still out in front by more than 10 lengths after the next turn, he would go ahead and he'd take another stamina penalty. So he'd keep going like that. He'd be down to 3. You know, he was at a 7 originally. Now he's down to 3. So that can really hurt somebody, and you really don't want to do that. I can't write a 3 to save my life right now. But anyway, so the way that works, that catch-up mechanism, it's not in effect for the full game either. So it's only in effect for the whole first lap, and then the second lap going up to Melling Road, which is this road that comes through here, but only over here, Melling Road. You don't count that as Melling Road. So on the second lap, he goes 1 full lap, and then the second lap, as soon as he passes here, he can basically go all out, and that's because you're not too far from finishing, so there's no catch-up mechanism now. Okay, so there's a few different spots on the board. There's horseshoe spots and there's fences. There's also a few spots that are water too. So anytime you land on a fence row or on a water spot, there's some water spots after the fences, just 2 fences, you'll draw a jump card. And then the jump card, you'll just do what it says on there. There's a few that are fallers that are specific for certain fences. Any fences with names you want to be wary of, because that's a chance that you'll have a faller. So if we zoom in here, so if a horse ends its turn on a fence, they'll draw a jump card. They'll have to try and meet to jump over that fence. You see in lanes 1 or 2, if you land in lanes 1 or 2, you lose 5 speed points. 3 or 4, you advance 5 lengths. 5 or 6, you'd advance 3 lengths. Now there's some cards in that deck that, depending on what your lane you're in, it'll put you down. It'll take the horse out of the race. So that's the jump card deck. And that's anytime you land on a fence. You end your turn on a fence. Now anytime you end your turn on a horseshoe, if we zoom in there, you can see the horseshoes. So there's spots that are blank, road, just regular land that's blank. But anytime you land on a horseshoe through your own doing on your turn, you draw a turf card, except on the very first turn. Now when we're coming out of the gate here, it doesn't matter if you end your turn on a horseshoe, you don't draw a card. The rest of the game, if you end your turn on a horseshoe, you draw a turf card. And the turf cards, I'm not even going to show you those. There's just different things that affect you during the game. Yeah, so if a horse ended his turn on a horseshoe card, he'd draw a turf card. But again, not on the first turn. After the first turn's over, you draw a turf card and you do whatever it says. Now those turf cards can either help or hurt your player, maybe help or hurt other riders in the game. Now, if you land on a horseshoe by means of landing on a fence, because sometimes you land on a fence and it tells you to move 3 spots, 1, 2, 3. Now I landed on a horseshoe, you don't draw a horseshoe card. So those are only 2 reasons why you would not draw a horseshoe card, which is a turf card or a go for home card. Those are the horseshoe cards. It's only on the first turn you don't draw them, and if you had to move because of a jump card and ended your turn on a horseshoe, you wouldn't draw the turf card or the go for home cards. So the turf card is the same deck as the go for home cards. So once the leader goes a full lap and then passes Beecher's Brook up here, then you replace the turf cards with the go for home cards. And the go for home cards are pretty similar to the turf cards, probably a little bit more of hurt the leader though. So if you are out in front with a horse, it's a good idea, if you can, get 2 horses out in front. That way you can have one take all the damage and the other one hopefully ride into victory. Now the turf cards, I will say there's 1 card in that deck that will take 1 horse out of the race. The go for home, I don't think there's any. The jump cards, depending on what lane you're in, you might have a horse taken down. Now it's not really uncommon to lose 1 or 2 horses in the game. With 4 stable horses, I usually lose probably 1, sometimes 2. I don't think I've ever lost 3. And if you've ever watched the actual race, there's a lot of horses involved in the race in real life, and there's a lot of times a pretty good amount of horses that get dropped through the fences as well. Okay, so my final take on the game here. We'll go over the cons and then we'll end on a high note with the pros. So the cons, I'd say the game length obviously is going to scare some people away. I mentioned about 30 minutes per player, so if you're playing the higher player count, 6 players, that's a 3-hour plus investment probably. So I think the game plays best with the higher player counts, 4 to 6 players. In order to kind of cut down on some of that time, I'd recommend avoiding the auction and just randomly dealing the cards out to the players, and maybe consider running the race with 3 horses per player. Again, I like the big grandiose game with lots of horses, so that's not something I've tried, but maybe something to consider. The rule book is a little iffy, but a lot of that's been cleaned up on BGG, so check that out. There's a lot of good posts to help you with that, and I think my video too. The markers that you get in the game, yeah, I mean, the game came out in 2001, so you're going to have to get new markers for it. But the markers in general are just kind of a pain in the ass to deal with. I wish there was something better going on here instead of the markers, because you tend to smudge things and just, I'd rather not deal with them, but it is what it is there. And then finally, I would say have some type of indicator for every horse on every stable that every player would put over their stable or whatever to show that horse has moved during that turn. It's easy during the game because different cards will advance different horses depending on their positions, and so they might advance but they still didn't move their turn for that turn, so you still have that turn coming up, so sometimes that gets tricky and you kind of forget, oh, did that horse go or not. So yeah, invest in, get something to show that you have indicators that show when your horse has ran that turn, so maybe like a poker chip that you put down over it after it's over the stable after it's raced for that it's went on that turn. Again, not smudging the marker. Haha. So pros for the game, I think this is a really good racing betting game. Good balance between the two. So the winner is whoever has the most money at the end of the game. So you can get money by your horses placing, you'll get a payout. But if your horses don't place and you bet well, you could still win the game or be in pretty close competition to do so. So I think it's a great theme here. The minis are awesome. If you like racing games, if you like horse racing, I think this is probably the best in the genre. That's just me. I really like Turf Master too. I know there's some other ones out there a lot of people enjoy as well. But if you're into racing games at all, whether it be the car games, there's some other themes out there, but this is a really good one. Don't pass it up. Take a look and see if you can find it on eBay, Board Game Geek, or Amazon. So it should be out there. Thanks for checking out this review.